we can do the check.
Yeah.
So basically what we're going to do today is make a homemade Brita filter. And I just say Brita because that's like the name everybody knows. But if you've ever used a Brita pitcher, or you have like the thingy that screws on to your faucet, some of you may know what I'm talking about, some maybe not. But the idea is it's this essentially charcoal-based filter that as the water goes through the filter, it comes out nice and clean. So I don't know if you wanted to pull that or do a formative assessment, or
about
if anybody's used a Brita before or knows what the heck I'm talking about. So has anybody used a Brita? Yay, nay, or filtered water through some? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what this is basically, and that's kind of what we're going to do today. So what we're going to do is we're going to build, and this is kind of a big one, but we're going to build like a Brita filter, and we're going to use a Gatorade bottle or some sort of plastic bottle to do it. And I'm not sure how well the lighting works here, but in principle, what we have is a bunch of charcoal, and that's kind of why we have the fire going. So we have a bunch of charcoal, and then we have a bunch of sand, and then we have like a small layer of gravel. And then the bottom I've cut off here, and we've created sort of like a little splash baffle, if you will. So we can pour our water into this, and it essentially will filter water out. There's a paper towel, there's a paper towel here on the bottom that sort of holds everything in and creates one last little layer of filter. And we're gonna talk about options for that. And the idea here is we're going to create a backcountry Brita filter. And so this will allow us to take like some swamp water or a bunch of lake water that I literally grabbed from the lake. That is, I don't know if you can see it. It's not like terribly gross.
It's like slightly yellow, but it's not too bad.
But I can tell you, like, if we took, you
wouldn't want to drink it.
There's some fun stuff in there.
Yeah, there's some little.
You would not want to take a big old swig of this.
You
wouldn't want to die, but so yeah, we've actually got some real stuff.
Okay, so just real quick, you all are gonna make your own. This is gonna be your lab assignment for this week. So and it's going to be due on the beginning of class Wednesday, and we're gonna do a show and tell. So please pay attention to all the steps. I will post the video of how to make it, but just pay attention, and we're going to give you other options for ways to make it based on what equipment you have at your house. I'm going to give you lots of options. So please pay attention.
Okay, so step one is basically modifying your bottle or your utensil. So this is again why I really like, and let's do a small one just in the interest of materials. The bigger the better. Like obviously the more layers you have, the more filtration you're gonna get, but just in the interest of principle and time, I'm just gonna use this little guy here. So the tricky part, really the hardest part of this whole thing, is getting the bottom off of this. And so having some sort of scissors or knife, I'm going to use a knife. I don't know, do you want to tilt that down? Or?
Yeah, I'm going to tilt.
What I'm going to do is use the knife to poke a hole and then use scissors to do the rest. Now, ideally, we don't want to do...
Don't stab yourself.
Yeah, and you know, if you need some help with this, grab a brother or sister or mom or dad or somebody that'll hold it for you, and then you can just cut them. But yeah, it's like twisting it and then kind of, you have a serrated knife, if you know what that is, that's a good way to go. And once you get the hole going, then you can get your scissors in here. You can totally just use a knife, and that's probably what you're going to have with you.
Not your chef's knife. Don't dull your chef's knife with the plastic, okay?
Okay, and then, yeah, and you're probably not going to have scissors, but let's do this in the interest of time and safety. We'll just do it with the scissors here.
Usually you don't bring scissors on the backcountry, but you know.
Maybe you got your Leatherman tool or whatever, and you can go to town with the scissors on there, but I think you get the point here. So we're going to cut this off, and we're going to save this thing. If you got a partner with you, they can sort of help you out here. We're going to save this, but we're basically going to trim it down a little bit so we can just stick it right back on the end. We're going to take the cap off. We don't really need the cap for now. Ultimately, we don't need the cap for functionality. It's just nice to put the cap on if you need to reuse this thing, okay? First step after we get that thing off is we're going to put our paper towel in the bottom, which is more or less going to and it doesn't have to be a paper towel for the record. You can use coffee filters. You can use a bunch of t-shirt material. You can use a sock. The idea is we're adding a final layer that will both filter but also catch everything, okay? So I don't know, I'm just grabbing like 2 paper towels here, and you know, it's not gonna hurt to go kind of thick. So I'm just folding it up, you know, like hamburger and hot dog style here. Is that still a thing? Do they teach that
Yeah,
still?
that's still a thing.
Cool. I don't know, it's a little thick. So if it's a little thick, whatever, just rip it. Use your best judgment, as they say. And we're just gonna ram this thing right down in there. And if you got a big old Gatorade bottle or you got small hands, like this is no problem. With mine, I'm gonna kind of use a tool here to sort of just get it in place. And I'm gonna kind of push it in there a little bit. I'm gonna be careful because I'm using scissors. I don't want to poke a hole, but I'm gonna get it in there a little bit. And really the whole purpose of that thing is to just kind of catch everything at the bottom, okay? At this point, we're gonna put in the charcoal. And so a couple things about charcoal. If you're out in the back country, finding charcoal could be as simple as like starting your fire and burning a bunch of stuff and then grabbing a bunch of that charcoal and a rock and just like grinding it up real good. Let me get this out of the way here. And so finding charcoal can be easy. It could be tricky. And one idea can always be like carrying a briquette of barbecue charcoal with you. And so one of the supplies you might be able to use in your project here is some charcoal briquettes if you have it already. We actually used a bunch of actual fire material from the fire pit over here. And again, it's kind of about finding it. Once you find it, it's pretty easy to grind this stuff up. And you want to grind it up into a really fine powder, like the finer the better, okay? Because that's your final step. And due to some like chemically awesome stuff about charcoal and how thin you can get it, which we won't go into all that stuff, that's why charcoal is super effective in both air and water filtration. So tricky part is how do you get it? Charcoal briquettes, go find a fire pit, something like that. Then you can grind it up real good or real well, sorry. And one of the things you're going to use on your list of tools is some sort of like filter here, and so or some sort of screen, so that we can get this really fine powder. That's the stuff we want right there. You know, this stuff's still a little bit thick. So we're going to grind that stuff up real well, and then you can either grab a spoon or something and you can put it into one of these filters here. Or screens, or what's the proper name for it? Strainer. There you go. And so this is one way to strain that stuff out really, really, really well. Finding one of those in the backcountry is kind of tough, and so in those situations, you just really need to be patient and use a rock, and just this stuff grinds up pretty well. But the finer the better, so be patient. Like, you're in a survival situation, sometimes you got nothing better to do sitting inside your tent, you know. So crush this stuff up real well. This is actually the one we made was with fire material. This guy right here, this is actually charcoal briquette from the barbecue. And so it's a little bit denser, and it's kind of going to take some time to grind it, but I'm literally just using a rock and charcoal here. Okay, so you've got your charcoal layer, and that's what we're going to put in here at the very bottom. So just in the interest of time, obviously this isn't like super fine, but it'll work, and we can use our strainer. I'm just going to get some of the big chunks out of here, and like some sort of spoon or whatever, or just use your hands. Just know it's going to be pretty dirty here. So we're going to put in our charcoal layer, and honestly, you probably want to err on the side of more charcoal than anything. The more charcoal, the better. Then after we get our charcoal in is when we're going to add a layer of sand. Okay, and so I'm going to multitask a little bit here. Sand's going to be the tricky one to find a little bit, although we have the river, and so I would highly encourage you guys to get outside and enjoy the sunshine while you still can, and head down to the river and find yourself some really fine beach sand, because that's going to be our next layer. And again, we want something really fine. So especially if you have like a strainer here, I'm going to show you how to use the strainer with just some good old-fashioned dirt. But the most effective one's going to be finding some really, really fine beach sand. Like this is stuff that we literally went down to the beach, down by the lake, and this even went through a strainer as well. So this is like super soft. There's no rocks in here, because we don't want to have any of this in here. We want to eliminate these as much as possible because that's just taking up space, and that's just more filtration that we could get, right? Okay. So we want to have sand as our next layer. So we've got some charcoal in there. I would say we probably want to get some more, but I don't think you guys want to sit here and watch me grind all this. But probably, you know, a solid like third, probably about a third of this full of charcoal. Okay. And the Gatorade bottle has these nice little like lines and graduations, which sort of help you sort of create a baseline. Okay. So then we're going to take a bunch of sand, and that's going to be our next layer. I probably should have grabbed a spoon of some sort, but also you may not have a spoon in the backcountry. So this is real world stuff here. So here, we'll use the lid and we'll improvise. Okay, so now we're gonna fill this thing, and that's gonna take forever. We're gonna fill this thing like 3/4 of the way. That's gonna go all over the place. Let's get, oh, hey, here we go. Now we're cooking with gas. Okay, so we're gonna add sand now. And side note, if you want to get like creative or probably more effective to some degree, you can add multiple layers. So you could go, all right, I got some charcoal, I got some sand, I got some charcoal, I got some sand. There's certainly no shame in that if you have the time and ability. It could to some degree be more effective, but also we're trying to survive here, you know. So keeping the show on the road, we're going to put some sand in here, and I'll show you how to get this sand from dirt if you don't have the ability to get it. And ultimately for the project, you know, just do your best. We just want to have progressively finer and finer material. Sorry, progressively finer and finer material as we go here. Can you tilt this up just a hair? There we go. Okay. Okay, so again, I'm putting a bunch of sand in here. I've got sand. I can keep going. We can get more. We got plenty more. And there you go. Like, here's another reason why the Gatorade bottle is just super handy. Like, now I've got a little scooper, right? Okay, so once I get, I don't know, like you want to leave a decent amount of room for our final layer because you're also going to put water in here, and it's going to take water time to work its way down, okay? And so we want to save a little bit of level at the top. We want a little room for cream, as they say, right? Okay, so that's pretty good. I'm gonna give it a little shake, but I'm not gonna shake it too much because I don't want to mix everything. I want the layers to stay pretty consistent here. So again, you're gonna want a little more charcoal in this, but you get the idea. So then we're gonna add sort of a gravel coarse layer, okay? And really this layer more than anything is to protect the sand. If I just go to town under a waterfall right now or like pour a bunch of water on this sand, it's going to create a big old divot. It's going to make a mess. And if anybody's ever done any building construction and laid concrete before, like you typically lay a layer of gravel down on top of the sand to protect this concrete from mixing with the sand. So it's the same principle, wood shop guys. So I'm going to take this gravel here, and the way I made this gravel is I literally just went out in my front yard and I made a bunch of dirt. I don't know if you can see the difference here. If you can, great. If not, chalk it up to our failure here. But this stuff is what we want. This is some straight up dirt, and it's got some big old chunks of rock in it and stuff. So you can always just go through this and like pick out the big old rocks. But pro tip, if you take some water and you fill this all with water, you can use physics to your advantage. And this is a little bit messy, but you can sort of mix this up, and the bigger rocks are easy to find and you can pull them out in handfuls, okay? And so that'll help you to kind of like filter this stuff manually, okay? So that's a little pro tip. That's basically how I went from this crap to this stuff, okay? And ultimately, if you got some rocks in there, it's no big deal. Again, this is a protective layer more than anything. but it also will provide like your preliminary protection. This will catch your bugs, this will catch chunks of grass. So it is effective, but ultimately its purpose is a protective final layer here. So we're just going to take the gravel. How are we doing on time? Okay, so I'm just going to take that gravel, and it doesn't have to be a very big layer. Like, that's not really a whole lot. Pro tip in the future, Frisk, take the label off. You can kind of see on mine here, the gravel layer is like right here. There's not much gravel, so the gravel is protective. So just a little layer there. Oops, sorry. And then the final step is we're going to take our shovel, and we're just going to trim this down a little bit. Okay, so take your scissors, and we're just going to kind of trim it down so it'll fit inside the bottle. So we're just going to kind of take, and this doesn't have to be perfect. You'll see why in a sec. This is just a final protective layer. You know, like clean up your plastic. Don't let it shoot all over the place like mine is. Okay, and then we're just going to take this little guy and we're going to stick it on top there. And I like the Gatorade bottles because they're kind of indented, so it'll sort of hold its place. And the idea there is it's, again, protecting from splashing, okay? So this here is really the same principle as a Brita filter or any sort of charcoal filtration system. You have multiple layers of progressively thinner and thinner material, okay? So then you're going to take your water source. Here's what we're going to do. Now, it will take a little bit of time for water to work through the system, but I'm going to grab some legit lake water here, and we're just going to pour it on in. And so again, with that little splash guard, it'll allow you to kind of pour it on in. And if you leave a little room for cream, you can sort of fill this thing up. And then I wouldn't recommend this necessarily, but it might stand up for you. And you can sort of watch as it slowly works its way down. You probably can't see it, but maybe, I don't know if you guys can see. Yeah, you can totally see that. Can you see the water going down through there? And it's just about to hit the charcoal layer, and hopefully you put more charcoal in there than I did. You want to tilt the screen up? Thank you. So you can kind of see the water making its way through here, and pour a little more. So my Gatorade one that we made earlier, it actually took, I don't know, it probably took about 10 minutes to actually get water to start drip. There it goes. Bada bang, look at that. Okay, so now what do you do, right? Oh crap, I've got water going, and this is relatively filtered. This is not sterile, right? We've got another step. Okay, what's the last step? Probably need to boil this stuff, right? So having some sort of container to now put it in is probably a good idea, and ideally some sort of container that you can now boil this into. Because again, this is going to catch a lot of stuff. This is not going to necessarily sterilize the water, okay? So this is something that if you have the right tools and you got some soil laying around and a little bit of know-how, what did that take? 10 minutes of coming up with and 20 minutes of me yapping. And so now we've got water in a boilable container. Is that a word? Yeah. And then we can head on over to that fire over there and we can just plop this thing down in the fire. Ideally, if you have some sort of lid, that might be a good idea. We could put this on top of her burner. We have a lot of options, and I think we're going to talk about that in a different lesson. But ideally, we just filtered everything, and now we need to go boil it, or maybe we put some iodine tablets in it, or we use a Sterapin, or we can use our life straw. We could use some bleach. Yeah, exactly. So again, this is to get the crud out. And then now we use any number of techniques that we talked about to make it potable is the word, right? Potable is the word of the day. Tell your parents, we learned potable today. Okay, cool.
All right.
No, don't do that because we're not done.
No,
remember, we gotta go boil that.